Welcome to our virtual reading group extra with Sarah Skwire. I'm Christy Horpedahl, and today we're continuing our VRG conversation on William Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 1 and Part 2. They are the second and third plays in William Shakespeare's Henry Tetralogy, and while it was supposed to be one play, there was just too much material. I blame Sir John Falstaff, but reasonable people could disagree. Henry IV is dying. His son, Henry, Prince of Wales, also known as Hal, also known as Henry V by the end of Part 2, is a rogue and seems to be, by all appearances, a disastrous choice for a king. And because perceived weakness invites rebellion, as Henry of Bolingbroke was a threat to Richard II, Henry Percy, the Earl of Northumberland, with others, are gunning for the throne, and everyone knows it. We've got fathers and sons, kings and subjects, fancy rogues, foolish rogues, and one of my all-time favorite tropes, a play within a play. So Sarah, who are we supposed to be rooting for? And does that change over the course of Part 1 or Part 2 or Part 1 and Part 2?
Oh, that's a really good question. I mean, I think because, and I'm sorry, I have to apologize. My dog is apparently super interested in Henry IV, Part 1 and 2, and really insisted on being a part of this discussion. So I'm just gonna be scritching his head over here, not exactly off camera. So we'll try and ignore him as much as we can.
Pets are always welcome in conversation.
he makes it a little difficult to ignore him. I think in a lot of ways, one of the central questions of the Henry IV plays that the audience is figuring out while watching them is who to root for. There are a lot of appealing candidates. I think one would think from the title of the plays that one is meant to see Henry IV as the hero, but as you point out, he spends certainly most of Part 2 dying or being sick and then dying. And in Part 1, he is very formal and very much off stage and isn't particularly given heroic material to work with. So that leaves us with probably a choice of three people to root for. The first is, of course, Prince Hal, who, as you know, will become Henry V by the end of Part 2. And I think he's who we're probably meant to be rooting for in terms of English history and all of the rest of that. But there's Hotspur, the young Harry Percy, son of the Earl of Northumberland, who is a direct counterpart to Prince Hal. Prince Hal is sort of a drinker and a card player, and he hangs out with evil companions of ill repute, like this guy down here. And generally sort of a bit of a rabble rouser and potentially a troublemaker. Harry Percy, Hotspur, has military virtues. He is all in on political stuff. Give that guy a battle, he'll go fight it. Give him a horse, he'll ride it faster than anyone in town. Give him a woman, she will be wooed quite thoroughly. He's a guy's guy. He's a football hero in a way that Prince Hal is not, right? And so they're set up in direct opposition to one another through the play, right? And then the third option, of course, is Sir John Falstaff, who you noted, who's not really, I have complicated feelings about Falstaff, but what I will say is that every time Falstaff is on stage, the play comes alive. In terms of excitement and humor and the plot going places and the language getting really exciting, the stage just lights up. He was such a popular character that Shakespeare had to go write other plays because of Sir John Falstaff, right? The Henry IV might have been initially envisioned as a single play, which then got divided into two, possibly, as you suggest, in part to allow for more Falstaff material. We know that Merry Wives of Windsor was written later because Sir John was so popular and people just wanted to see more Sir John Falstaff on stage, right? So he's another option, and I think he's an option who, as we move through history, has gone in and out of favor with audiences as being, you know, the villain of the piece or the heart and soul of the piece, right? And you can see it in different productions of the play, how he's viewed. That was a long answer to a short question. I'm sorry.
No, it's great. I actually don't think of Falstaff as a possible candidate for who we're rooting for, and I need to think more about why he does not come to mind for me. But while I think
he's a very bad man.
He's a bad man.
Right, but
yeah.
you know, there's something about his humor and something about his gusto for life that I think a lot of people find enormously appealing.
Well, he's clearly charismatic, and that's something that we also see in Hal, right? And so it's interesting, especially because you mentioned how kind of dour Henry IV is by the time we get to these plays. Falstaff is a contrast, being sort of a father figure to Hal, being a sort of charismatic, makes the room alive kind of person. It's interesting to think of how much of Hal has grown up kind of with that as another kind of model for a kind of leadership.
Right, and we talked during the last session of the reading group when we were talking about the Henry IV plays, we talked a little bit about the way that Hal seems to set out to get himself a real varied education, right? He gets one kind of education in Eastcheap hanging out with Falstaff and his tavern buddies. He gets another kind of education when he's at court talking with his father. He gets another kind of education on the field of battle, right? So he gets all of these different kinds of educations, and I think he's learning something very specific from each one of them. And so I do think, I think he learns some very specific and probably very useful lessons from hanging out with Falstaff and his friends.
I actually kind of think you could read the Henry plays as a makeover story for Henry V, right? Bad boy, goes into the military, gets ripped, probably gets a haircut, finds a good mentor, right? And then he becomes king. This is like Danny Zuko in Greece. This is like Daniel LaRusso in The Karate Kid. I think Henry IV Part 1 and 2 actually a makeover story.
Maybe, except that Hal knows exactly what he's doing the entire time that he's doing it, right? One of the most famous speeches in the play, and I don't have my reading glasses, so forgive me if I get my line numbers wrong. In the first part of Henry IV, it's Act 1, Scene 2, lines about 190 and following. Hal gets this moment alone on stage, and Hal is not alone super often. He's usually surrounded by his Eastcheap companions, by Falstaff and his buddies. Right, and he says, you know, I know you all and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness, yet herein will I imitate the sun, who doth permit the base contagious clouds to smother up his beauty from the world, that when he please again to be himself, being wanted, he may be more wondered at, right? And it goes on from there. My reformation glittering o'er my fault, shall show more goodly and attract more eyes than that which hath no foil to set it off. Also offend to make offense a skill, redeeming time when men least think I will. So Hal is very deliberate about this, right? He's someone like Danny Zuko in Greece, right? Undergoes this makeover, but doesn't sort of set out saying, I'm going to be a bad boy in order to be able to reform later and be more impressive. That's what Hal does. I'm going to behave in a way to mislead everyone about the kind of person that I am and about the kind of king that I might be, so that when I start to behave like my true self, everyone's going to be doubly impressed, right? So I'm a little reluctant to read it as a straight makeover story, though I get the urge and I like the pop culture parallel. But I think Hal is a little bit more deliberate about what he's doing than someone like Danny Zuko.
I know in the reading group, we mentioned that he's kind of Machiavellian about it, right? And I think a moment that you really see this is in his interaction with the Lord Chief Justice, right? Everyone thinks that when he becomes king, he is going to continue all of these antics. That's the only thing they know him for. And one of the first things he does is he commends the Lord Chief Justice, keeps him on in that position, and even tells him he wants him to be like a father to him now that his own father is gone. And that is such an amazing moment in the play, and I think really supports your point that he's not stumbling into anything. What did you think of that moment? If you can remember the first time you read it or the first time you saw it, what do you remember what you thought about
I mean, it's yet another one of these moments. Hal is in a lot of ways a son looking for a father through these whole plays. He's just always looking for somebody who's sort of gonna lead him through, right? So we've got Henry IV in that aspect. We've got Falstaff serving that purpose. We then get the Lord Chief Justice serving that purpose. And in Henry V, Fluellen a little bit, probably more than anyone else, serving sort of as a father figure for Hal. And so that's one of the first things I noticed is, oh, here we go again. Here's Hal and his daddy issues, right? But also it's the beginning of this long series of sort of repudiations of his past companions that begins here when he says, when he says to the Lord Chief Justice, you put me in jail and I deserved it. I was acting like an idiot. I hope you will do the same thing to my son when I have one, if he behaves the way that I did. And I want you to keep your post because you're the kind of person who should be overseeing the law in England, right? And it's almost immediately followed by a scene when Falstaff hears that Hal has taken the throne and sort of runs off saying, steal any man's horses. The laws of England are at my command, honor and glory to my friends and woe to my Lord, the Chief Justice, right? Because Falstaff still has not clocked that things are not going to be as they used to be once Hal is on the throne. They're not going to continue, getting drunk together and chasing girls and knocking over drugstores in Eastcheap. That's not how it's going to work. And so that moment with the Chief Justice is really the first big public moment, right? Because this is done in front of other people. It's really that first big public moment where Hal says, I am not going to be, and I am not the kind of person you thought I was, right? The kind of kingship you can expect from me is very, very different. And we're going to see that repeat. We see it repeated again and again in Henry IV Part 2. And we're going to see it continue well into Henry V, right? Spoiler alert.
So
when Bardolph is hanged for stealing from the church, for example. Sorry.
It's okay. That's
Sorry,
actually a
spoilers
legitimate
of
spoiler for me because I haven't read it
play.
yet, but that's okay. Sorry.
Play's been out for a little while, so I don't think I really probably spoiled.
I'm getting to it soon, right? So you've also said a couple times that you prefer Part 1 to Part 2. I think I know a little bit of why that is, but why is that you have that strong preference?
Oh, it's probably because I'm shallow. I think Part 1 is much, much funnier. I think the jokes are much, much better. I think by part 2, you've kind of gotten a little tired of the Eastcheap scenes and of the tavern scenes. And I think they've gotten, to me, I think for good reasons, but to me, they've gotten a little more bitter, a little more sour, a little less lighthearted than they were in Part 1. And I think that's an important transition for the play, but it makes it a lot less fun to watch and to read. You don't get, I think, you don't get Shakespeare at the height of his poetic powers. I think in Part 2, I don't think you get anything that reaches the heights of that speech from Hal that I just read or some of the other speeches. You also, and I'm a sucker for a good battle scene. You don't get good battle scenes in Part 2. They just, for a variety of reasons that are too complicated to go into, it appears that Shakespeare sort of ran out of chronicle because if what he did was divide one long play into 2 plays, it looks like he sort of ran out of chronicle history on the reign of Henry IV before he got to the end of Henry IV Part 2. And there wasn't, so we get what looks like it's going to be a great battle, and then it kind of dissolves into diplomacy and some betrayal and some people get hanged, and it just doesn't you don't build to that sort of martial peak, which of course is the way that history works, but it makes for a less exciting play.
Yeah, it's also the squelching of a rebellion when you're not necessarily rooting for the status quo, right? Isn't nearly as exciting to watch.
I mean, we know where we're going with Henry V, right? We know we're about to hit like a major sort of dramatic peak in English history, right? We've got the Battle of Agincourt. It's coming. I promise it's coming. And it's coming. But knowing that it's there is not necessarily enough to get us like super excited that Henry IV is going to stay on the throne, right? He's a hard guy to root for. So you root for him because we like Hal, who's not as much on stage in part 2 as he is in part 1, which is, I think, another reason that a lot of the sort of the fun goes out of that play.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of my favorite parts from the play. Do you have a favorite part in part 1 or part 2? I know it probably won't be part 2, but do you have a favorite part or speech from part 1 that you want to talk about a little bit? And then I'll have one more question after that.
Well, I'm gonna, controvert expectations and say that one of the moments that I really do love and that I really do think is incredible is at the end of part 2 when Hal repudiates Falstaff, right? So we've had this scene where Hal said to the Chief Justice, you get to be in charge of the laws of England. We've had Falstaff out of town hear that Hal has become king and race off to join him. And he goes and he sort of like arrives and Falstaff is all like sweating and dirty and he just like shows up, and it's explicit in the play that like he hasn't even had time to change. He's like, not changing will show the king how much I rushed to come and see him. And he approaches Hal and is sort of like, Bubba, I'm so proud of you. And Hal says, I know thee not, old man, how ill white hairs become a fool and jester, right? And refuses to proceeds to publicly dress down Falstaff for his behavior and for his lack of dignity and for the way he has failed to uphold what it means to be a knight and a gentleman and an Englishman and a respectable person, and just to drop him completely. He does promise to give him a competence to live on, so pension him off, right? But basically doesn't want to hear from him. He doesn't know him anymore, right? Talk to the king's hand, right? Not interested.
Talk to the Chief Justice's hand, right? Not
exactly, right? And I think that is a moment that is incredibly important for Hal as a character and for Hal coming into his kingship. I think it is a moment that is heartbreaking for the audience because we do like Falstaff, despite his many flaws, including the fact, and I just always have to say this out loud, that when Falstaff is told to hire soldiers for the king's army, he hires the worst ones that he can find to fight in the army and says they will do to fill a pit as well as any other men, right? Food for powder, right? So he just hires guys who he knows will die in battle and he doesn't care, right? So despite all that about Falstaff, we still have we love his humor and we love those scenes in Eastcheap and watching Hal repudiate him, watching Hal turn him away hurts, and it's supposed to. And I think it's really a moment where we see Shakespeare's ability to give us those complex characters and the complexity of the situations in which they find themselves, right? To make us love a character like Falstaff, to make us understand why Hal has to turn him away, and to make us at the same time proud of Hal and heartbroken. Yeah, that's an amazing feat.
It is. And I think for me, watching the play a second time and going back to the Banish Plump Jack speech after seeing the harshness of the ending speech makes that original moment so much more powerful. And it was already powerful to begin with, right? So to see Hal predicting to Falstaff, I will disown you, but
Yeah.
Falstaff begging to basically still be a part of his life. And then on the second time you hear that speech, already knowing what's coming for Falstaff, it's such a powerful moment for a playwright, because it's powerful when you haven't seen the end, and then it's powerful in a whole different way when you've experienced the whole play and then you're going back and you're looking at it again.
Yeah. And I think they're both moments where we talked about this again a little bit in the VRG, right? We talked about, so Falstaff gives this like really long speech about don't, you love me, never banish me. This is way back in part 1 of the play. Banish plump Jack Falstaff, kind Jack Falstaff, sweet Jack Falstaff, valiant Jack Falstaff, old Jack Falstaff, and therefore more valiant as he is being old Jack Falstaff. Banish plump Jack, banish all the world, right? This is like, I think I counted out, I think I said it's 55 words in the last sentence of that speech. And Hal just says, I do, I will. Boom. It's like a kick in the gut. And then again, at the end of part 2, Falstaff has this long speech about, I'm so glad to see that you are king now. And Hal gives a long speech in return, but that first line of the speech is, I know thee not, old man. Boom, another punch in the gut, right? When Hal gets monosyllabic and gives you a short line, you're in for it.
Well, I could spend all afternoon, but we promised to keep these short, so we will.
Yes.
I'm going to end there, but for those of you who don't know and have watched the whole video, Sarah Skwire is a senior fellow at Liberty Fund, as well as a Shakespeare scholar. And this conversation is in part inspired by a virtual reading group hosted by Liberty Fund on Richard II, Henry IV, part 1 and part 2, and Henry V. So our last VRG Extra will be coming after our last session, but I want to thank you for joining us. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much. It was a treat, Christy.